I'm once again joined by Paul Johnson, Chief Executive of Multi-Commodity Project Group, Power Metal Resources, Epic Code POW. Paul, hello again. We spoke last week. How are you doing?
Hello, Alan. Yes, I'm fine. It was only a week ago, yet a few things have happened in between then and now.
They certainly have. We're in the start of September now, of course, but this week after the bank holiday, you've already made two major announcements. Firstly, can you tell us about the geophysics bullseye target you found at the FDR Copper and Gold project in the Paterson Province in Australia?
Yeah, sure. Now, a little bit of background. The first development resources package is one we originally announced to market back in January 2021. And it's a package that we're looking to accelerate through into an IPO process when the acquisition completes. And the acquisition of this project package, which is in the Paterson Province in Western Australia, a hugely popular area with the recent Greatland Gold discovery at Havieron and the Rio Tinto discovery at Winu. The package acquisition will complete when the Wallal project license is granted. And we're optimistic that will happen quite soon, because we've done all the preparatory steps and we've signed off on the heritage agreements locally. So we're pretty much ready to go. So we're waiting for that. Now, while we're waiting, we're looking to define drill targets. We're doing exploration. It's principally desktop-based exploration at the moment until the license is granted. And previously we'd found within the Wallal project, which is actually a group of three licenses in total, we'd found two major anomalies, the Western anomaly and the Eastern anomaly. And with the announcement this week, we've identified a further third anomaly. It's called the border anomaly. We are imaginative in our names, I think it's fair to say. But the reason why it's called the border anomaly is because it actually cuts over the edge of the Wallal license boundary. And about 70% of the anomaly is in the FDR territory, which is what we're acquiring effectively. And about 30% falls into Rio Tinto's exploration license ground next door. So it makes for an interesting scenario building, obviously. Yeah. We're following, these are deep targets, they're undercover. And, it's not the very old-fashioned way of doing exploration where you go and do your ground sampling and mapping and all the rest. You actually are using quite high impact technologies to look below the surface and see what's there. So it does fall into the high risk category. But the Eastern anomaly and the border anomaly that we've identified, which will be the focus of initial drilling activity, and we're just working on that now to plan out those drill programs ready for when we get the licenses granted and the IPO undertaken of this package. Those anomalies are bearing lots of similarity to the Havieron deposit that was the major driver for the Greatland Gold revaluation, mainly that's occurred over the last 18 months. So we're pretty excited about them. As I say, this is high risk stuff. There is no guarantee of success, but we're optimistic, as you have to be. We're doing costings for the drill programs. We're preparing ourselves to do drilling at the two main targets, and then we'll see what happens. Obviously, if we're successful and we end up striking a major copper gold deposit, then the roof is going to lift on the share price of the IPO vehicle, First Development Resources, and anyone that holds a material position. And Power Metal will hold a very material position in that stock on IPO.
Well, I was talking on a podcast earlier about the Greatland Gold development at Havieron, and of course, I think the market cap of the company was some 20 to 30 million, and then of course, once it did the deal with Newcrest, and still only with a 35% holding on the territory, the valuation I think last December hit something like 1.3, 1.4 billion.
Yeah, not a bad story. Well, I refinanced and restructured Greatland in early 16 when I was CEO of Metal Tiger, and we put money in at 0.1 pence a share. So given it it hit 38 pence a share back in January 21, you can see the kind of upside you get with these major discoveries. And that's why you go for it, because, you know, the chance of success is low, let's be quite frank. But the expected value of the overall transaction, if you look at that chance of success versus the valuation of the project, if you are successful and make a discovery, is dramatic. So it's worth putting that money in. Now, it's not cheap to do the deep drill holes, but it's not out of reach. Most junior exploration companies wouldn't consider this kind of thing because they need to keep a lot of their money in-house to cover their corporate costs. In our case, you know, we're running one PLC vehicle at the moment that has multiple project interests. We're very keen and lean, and we can start to consider this kind of thing.
Indeed, indeed. Well, Paul, let's. Power Metal is a truly global entity, straddling the globe with the various projects that you're running and you're involved in. So we're going to go to the USA now, because you made another announcement this week with an option agreement to purchase the Pilot Mountain project from Thor Mining, which adds already to your Golconda, Stonewall and Garfield projects in Nevada. Please tell us all.
Yeah, this is another relatively long story. Back in I think it was November 16, I was out at Pilot Mountain. I was a director of Thor Mining that held the project back then. Thor acquired Pilot Mountain in 2014, and we went out on site to have a look around. Always been very impressed by the project. I'm not a geologist, but I can do accounts just about. And this is a project that has a very substantial JORC compliant resource. Interestingly, most of it's in the indicated category. You see lots of resources published in the inferred, the lowest kind of strength category, as it were, but most is in indicated, which means the data can be used in feasibility studies if you're thinking about taking something into, you know, production, as it were. I suppose it depends on the day of the week with metal prices, but you're around $1.5 billion US. It's that's $1.5 billion US at the moment of theoretical in situ value. Now that tells you virtually nothing about the economic viability of the project, but what it does tell you is that if you're looking at the tungsten, copper, zinc and silver that's already been identified at that project, it's a very substantial amount of metal in the ground. Now, we think there's a dramatic amount of upside available from exploration at the property. And we think, you know, that there is a prospect of really adding to the work that's been done over the last few years by Thor and turning this into something quite special. Now, if you look at the from Thor's perspective, they will get you know, a material amount of power metal stock. They will have warrants at the premium, and if we do what I should do, I believe we will do in the coming months and potentially, you know, 2 or 3 years, and drive our share price higher materially, and you probably understand what I mean by materially, then Thor will benefit with millions of pounds of value generated from this transaction. So I think it works for both sides. But it is very much a passion project, if that's the right phrase. I don't know. Having been involved with it for many years and then been out on site, seen the size and scale of this thing, Pilot Mountain is a mountain. I can assure you of that, having walked up it a couple of times. And it's a very exciting addition for our business group. Now, what it does, of course, is it brings for the first time a material JORC compliant resource within the power metal portfolio. And I should say we do have to complete the due diligence, but obviously we've done a certain amount of due diligence before we even do the option agreement, but we have to do a lot more detailed work, and that's what's happening right now.
Okay. You mentioned warrants just then. Of course, it's been a very successful source of revenue generation for you over the year. And you announced this week, of course, a further 5 million warrants, I believe, were exercised, bringing another £100,000 into the company. And of course, that happens regularly every few weeks. So your cash position must be really strong.
Yeah, we're comfortable as we've maintained that, you know, a comfortable position all the way through, really, in control of our finance. We don't lash out vast amounts of money on board costs. We're certainly not jetting around the world, and even if we were, you know, the the business wouldn't be spending a great amount on it. The 100,000 that came in, the 5 million shares converted at 2p, were from our partners in Botswana, Kavango Resources. They paid the £100,000 in for those 5 million shares, just to be clear, and they received in exchange, as per the original agreement back in September 20, replacement warrants that are called super warrants at 5 pence a share. And of course, I'm an optimistic CEO. I expect them to exercise those shares within the remainder year that's left, because I'm intending to drive my share price far higher than that 5 pence level. But the markets, can surprise. So we'll see what happens.
The markets are the markets. So Paul, let's talk about the IPOs again. We talked briefly about them last week and what they do for Power Metal. Can you elaborate further on your IPO plans?
Yeah, sure. So the announcements this week, not the warrants announcement, but the FDR additional bullseye announcement. FDR, we're planning to take through its own IPO process, bring it onto the London capital markets in an accelerated pathway to market. So we're not going to mess around with it in theory. We're going to build up the vehicle, get the licenses granted, get everything ready to go and move it straight onto the market. Golden Metal Resources, another IPO, is where the pilot mountain project is going to go. And it will join the other projects, which are more what I call the blue sky exploration projects, Golconda, Garfield and Stonewall. And it brings into that package a more advanced asset, which, gives the IPO more substance, as it were, and increases its valuation. So with those two in mind, those are two of our early IPOs. In addition, of course, people know about the Victoria Goldfields joint venture we have with Red Rock Resources that's also accelerating through the IPO preparation and process. So we have multiple different things. We haven't even talked about some of the others, that are being worked on at the moment. Kanye Resources, Botswana, Silver Peak project in Canada, the Holding Co, our partners in Malopo Farms, looking for an IPO. So there's multiple different IPO processes happening right at the same time. And there will be a lot of information to come out on that in the coming weeks, months, in fairness. We would like to let the market know how we're going. The IPO process itself is quite a complex compliance process. So it's not quite the same full-on free disclosure that you would normally have in a business that's already listed, but still we'd like to tell people what's happening. We think there is an immense opportunity in Power Metal to create considerable value on the balance sheet, which is our primary objective at this moment. To build up the value on the balance sheet, increase our financial strength, and enable us to keep punching hard with exploration. We have quite a few projects that we're exploring on. Now, at this stage, of course, the exploration costs are quite modest overall, but let's assume we find a major discovery, and I expect us to do so. Otherwise, why be in this position? Then when we make a major discovery, we have two choices. We may well get partners come along offering joint ventures. We may get acquisition offers for a project if it's sufficiently attractive to an acquirer. But whether we get offers or not in the early stages, the chances are we'll have to increase our expenditure on exploration because we'll probably want to build the value up a little bit more. There's an interesting scenario when you make a discovery and you get interest. Do you sell the project or JV the project immediately, or do you do that bit more work to demonstrate the extent of mineralization and the size and scale of an opportunity? Because that will dramatically increase the value. And of course, there comes a point eventually where the marginal valuation increase by spending the extra exploration pound is not as much, and that's probably the ideal moment where you would want to vend something out of the business and dispose of it, or possibly do that joint venture deal. But I recognize that if we're successful as a business in what we do, down the line we will need greater working capital requirements. Now, do you want me as a shareholder to go begging cap in hand to the city brokers? I'm a private investor across multiple firms, and if the markets are favorable, it's easy to go and raise capital.
Yeah.
But we have to assume that they're not going to stay favorable. And we have to assume that there will be difficult challenges, difficult times. And so by having a very robust, strong balance sheet with our own financial capability, we just change the nature of our business. We're in control. And if we're in control as management, our shareholders are in control, and we'll have more confidence in what we're able and capable of doing as we build the business going forward. So, yeah, IPOs are very important. Some people I know have said that the IPOs have maybe been a little bit delayed. Well, not really delayed. They're just a process that you go through that takes some time. And sometimes, yes,
it does take time.
Longer. And you know what? If they have been delayed, then thank goodness they have, because the markets have been awful. And if we'd have been bringing some of these vehicles on in the middle of an absolute pullback phase in the natural resource sector, they wouldn't have performed. People would have lost confidence, perhaps, in the IPO process, and that would be a great shame. So I think we may be fortuitous in terms of when we're going to hit the market with some of these IPOs in 2021 and in 2022, and there'll be a great lift of confidence in the power metal stock as they start to drop through the door, because they are going to be dropping through the door.
So much for investors to look forward to in the latter half of this year and into 2022. Just remains for me to say, Paul Johnson, Chief Exec of Power Metal Resources, thanks once again for joining us today.
Thanks, Alan.